to Vice President Joe Biden's decision not to join the race.
Hillary Rodham Clinton tweeted that the vice president is a good friend and a great man, today and always inspired by his optimism and commitment to change the world for the better. Senator Bernie Sanders issued a statement in which he thanked Biden for a lifetime of public service, calling him a good friend who made a decision that he feels is best for himself, his family, and his country. Sanders says Biden understands the need to rebuild the middle class and address income and wealth inequality. Jerry Bodlander, Washington.
Delaware Senator Chris Coons joining us live this morning to talk about a number of issues. But, Senator, let's start with the announcement from Vice President Biden. What are your thoughts on the announcement, and what does it mean moving forward for the Democratic Party?
Well, Peter, this was a deeply personal decision, and as the Vice President laid out, I think as he and his family have gone through the very difficult healing process, the grieving process after losing Beau, they did the right thing. They put their family first. As they always have, the Bidens put their own. Joe Biden's public life over 40 years, he has always put his own family at the center of his service, something I deeply admire about him. And I think it's a loss for the country that he's not going to be getting into the race for the nomination. I think Joe is our strongest voice for the middle class. He has an amazing experience over the last 40 years in national security and in foreign policy. And I think he would have brought a big heart and a lot of energy to a race that is still wide open. So I was disappointed that he chose not to run, but I completely understand what is a deeply personal decision.
Off one of our other top stories this morning, Senator, Newcastle County Councilman Jay Street sending a letter to the Delaware delegation, yourself, Senator Carper, Congressman Carney, claiming that the Federal Violence Reduction Network hasn't done what it should be doing to reduce crime in Wilmington. Here's just one of the snippets of what he had to say.
Reduction in murders and shootings within the city of Wilmington, so I don't see where it's had any impact at all.
Let me get your thoughts on that. Is that an accurate assessment of this program and what it's done or not done for the city?
Peter, look, I've known Jay for many years. We served together in county government, and I deeply respect his passion and his hard work and his advocacy, particularly for Hilltop Lutheran, which is in a community right at the center of the violence. But I think he's completely off base about the Violence Reduction Network, what it was supposed to do and what it has done. It has made a significant improvement in how the Wilmington Police Department is using crime analysis, is doing community policing. Just two quick stats, if I could. There's been a 33% increase in arrests where guns were used, and the clearance rate of homicides, meaning essentially the number of cases that have been solved, has gone from 10% to 50%. And if you ask WPD leaders, elected leaders, they'll say that the mentoring, the technical assistance, the training, the material support that Violence Reduction Network has provided has made these significant improvements possible. It was never the case that some outside consultants and advisors from the federal government were going to solve our violent crime problem in Wilmington. They are there to make a real contribution in partnership with the Wilmington Police Department. Of all the cities in the National Violence Reduction Network, the 10 cities, I consistently hear from the Department of Justice, Wilmington is doing a great job at embracing and utilizing the opportunities that the Violence Reduction Network has provided to improve policing skills and technology and engagement. But there's a lot of causes of violent crime in our city, and VRN was not going to be the sole solution to it. I look forward to talking to Councilman Street and reviewing his concerns and seeing what else we can do together to improve and strengthen the work of WPD in fighting violence in our community.
Let's talk about another element of the criminal justice system. The Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act of 2015 introduced bipartisan support here. One of the elements, it reduces mandatory minimum sentences for some nonviolent crimes. Do you like this bill? And if so, how come? Why does it work well?
Peter, I'm a co-sponsor of this bill. I was just talking to Republican Senator John Cornyn this morning, who's one of the leaders on the Republican side on this bill. This has strong bipartisan support, and I think this shows real progress in rebalancing some of our federal sentencing laws. We have become the world's greatest jailer. We have a greater percentage of our population in federal prison than any other advanced developed country. It is eating up an enormous amount of the federal budget within the Department of Justice, more than all other federal law enforcement combined. And it's having a significant negative impact on communities where whole generations of people are in prison due to significant mandatory minimums that were imposed 20 or 30 years ago. This will rebalance some of our federal sentencing laws, reducing some mandatory minimum terms for nonviolent drug offenders, while strengthening the ability of law enforcement to go after violent criminals, particularly those involved with violent domestic abuse. It also includes some provisions that deal with solitary confinement for juveniles, and it strengthens some security provisions for federal law enforcement officers. I think it is a big step forward on a key civil rights and public safety issue, and a positive event in what is often a divided and partisan Senate.
Talk about this element of it. These are nonviolent offenders, but offenders nonetheless, and you're letting them out in many instances here under this measure. What about keeping them out and not having them come back in, the recidivism aspect of things?
Well, one of the key provisions of this bill requires that there be active and effective participation by prisoners in a recidivism reduction program before they are reviewed, and requires individualized reviews. This should not lead to a wholesale release of prisoners. This is a bill that enjoys wide support from the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, the U.S. Conference of Bishops, the Major Cities Police Chiefs Organization. It has wide support among both law enforcement and criminal justice groups. There are some who criticize the bill for not being bigger, for not going bolder, but in a Republican-controlled Congress, to have real bipartisan support for this bill that strengthens some mandatory minimums, reduces others, and rebalances how we manage the federal prison challenge, the prison overcrowding challenge, and the budgetary challenge, and the human rights challenge of our prison system. I think this is significant progress.
All right, very good. Senator Chris Coons joining us here. Delaware's Morning News. Senator, thanks much. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Peter.
8:38 now on Delaware's Morning News. Take a break, return, traffic and weather together as Delaware's Morning News